He wasn't on the list of cases. He wasn't even supposed to be there. Yet he stood before the bench, clutching a crumpled folder in his hands and whispering, "Please, Your Honor, I just need you to listen. Before we go further, don't forget to subscribe to Sweet Justice, where every story reminds us that behind every verdict lies a human heart." The courtroom was nearly empty that morning, just the low hum of the ceiling fan and the echo of footsteps on marble floors. The judge had just finished a long docket when the doors creaked open, and a man in tattered clothes stumbled inside. His beard was unkempt, his eyes hollow but burning with something deeper than pain, desperation. The bailiff moved forward, ready to remove the stranger, but the judge, an older man with decades of experience and an instinct for truth, raised his hand. Something in the homeless man's voice, that trembling mixture of guilt and love, made him pause. "Let him speak," the judge said quietly. And in that moment, the courtroom that had seen hundreds of criminals, liars, and broken souls was about to hear a story unlike any other. A father's story. A story of loss, truth, and the unbreakable bond between a parent and a child. No one in that room knew that by the end of that day, not just one life, but many would be changed forever. "You said continue," ChatGPT said. The bailiff hesitated, unsure whether to follow the judge's order or the courtroom protocol. The man looked frail, his clothes torn, his shoes barely holding together. Yet there was something hauntingly determined in the way he stood, refusing to bow even under the weight of humiliation. "What's your name?" the judge asked, leaning slightly forward. "Ethan, sir. Ethan Cole." His voice cracked halfway through his name, but he didn't break eye contact. He held the judge's gaze like a drowning man gripping the edge of a boat. The judge motioned for him to step closer. The bailiff relaxed slightly, though his eyes never left the man. Ethan approached the stand, his hands trembling as he placed the old folder on the desk in front of him. Its edges were bent, papers yellowed, corners stained with coffee and time. "I know I'm not supposed to be here," Ethan said quietly. "I know this courtroom is for real cases, but this is the only place left that might still listen." The judge studied him carefully. The lines on Ethan's face told stories of sleepless nights, cold sidewalks, and silent prayers. "Mr. Cole," he said, his tone soft but firm, "what is it that you need me to hear?" Ethan took a deep breath, clutching the folder tighter. "My daughter, Lily," he whispered. "They took her from me 2 years ago. Said I wasn't fit. Said I didn't have a home. But Your Honor." His lips trembled, his voice lowering to a painful rasp. "They never gave me a chance to prove I could be one again." The courtroom fell silent. Even the ticking of the old clock on the back wall seemed to pause. The judge gestured gently. "Tell me everything from the start." Ethan nodded slowly. "I used to have a home, a small place just outside the city. Worked as a mechanic for 15 years. Nothing fancy, but it was enough for me and Lily. She used to sit on the counter and hand me tools, always smiling, always saying she'd be a doctor one day so she could fix people like I fixed cars." A faint smile tugged at his lips before fading away. "Then the factory shut down. They said they were moving operations overseas. Within a month, the shop closed. Within 3, I was behind on rent. Lily's mother had already left years before, so it was just me and her. I tried everything. Odd jobs, nights at warehouses, even cleaning offices. But it wasn't enough." He looked down, ashamed. "The landlord kicked us out. I thought I'd find something in a week or 2, but those weeks turned into months. And one night, when we were sleeping in my car, someone must have reported us. The next morning, child services showed up. They said they were just there to check on her safety. But by the end of the day, she was gone." The judge's fingers tightened on the edge of his bench. His face remained composed, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of emotion. Ethan continued, his words breaking apart like fragile glass. "They told me I could see her after I got stable housing and a steady job. But it's not that easy when you're sleeping on benches and fighting just to eat. Every door I knocked on closed before I could even explain. People see a man who's homeless and think he's broken beyond repair. But I'm not, sir. He stopped, pressing his fists to his eyes. "I just need someone to believe that I can still be her father." The courtroom's silence grew heavier, wrapping around every word like fog. The judge leaned back, exhaling slowly. Mr. Cole, did you ever have legal representation? Ethan shook his head. Couldn't afford one. And the free attorney they gave me, he didn't care. I was just another file in his stack. And what's in that folder? The judge asked, nodding toward the papers Ethan clutched like a lifeline. Ethan opened it gently, revealing letters, school drawings, and official documents. Proof, he said softly. Letters Lily sent me from the foster home. They stopped coming 6 months ago, I think she's forgotten me. He held up a small drawing, the kind a child would make with crayons. 2 stick figures hand in hand under a crooked house. At the bottom, in shaky letters, it read, "Me and Daddy forever." The judge swallowed hard. Mr. Cole, he said after a moment, you came here today without notice, without an attorney, and without a case on the docket. But what you've said can't just be ignored. Ethan looked up, hope flickering like a candle barely alive. You believe me? The judge nodded slowly. I believe that everyone deserves to be heard, especially a father fighting for his child. A murmur rippled through the courtroom staff. Ethan closed his eyes, whispering something under his breath, something that sounded like thank you. The judge turned toward the bailiff. Find out who handled this man's case in family court. Bring me the file. The bailiff nodded and hurried out. As Ethan stood there, the sunlight from the high windows fell across his face, illuminating every scar, every wrinkle, every untold story. For the first time in years, he wasn't invisible. The judge folded his hands, deep in thought. He had seen thousands of cases in his career. Thieves, liars, broken people with broken excuses. But this one felt different. This wasn't a case of crime. This was a case of compassion. And in that silent courtroom, something began to shift, not just in law, but in humanity itself. The bailiff returned 20 minutes later, holding a thick manila folder marked Family Court, Case 10723. Cole. Ethan. The judge's brow furrowed as he accepted it, scanning the worn cover. It was clear this file had been passed around too many hands and forgotten in too many drawers. Ethan stood quietly, his hands clasped in front of him, almost afraid to breathe. Every second felt like an eternity. Mr. Cole, the judge said, flipping through the first few pages. According to these documents, your daughter was placed in state care due to unsafe living conditions. Ethan nodded weakly. We were in my car that night. It was cold, but I had blankets. I thought it was safer than a shelter. The judge looked up. Did they ever reassess your case after that? No, sir. I tried to contact the caseworker, but she stopped responding. I went to the office 3 times. They said there were too many cases, not enough staff. The judge sighed, shaking his head slightly. Typical bureaucracy, he muttered under his breath. He flipped another page and paused. It says here you completed a job readiness program last year. Yes, Your Honor, I finished it. Got a certificate and everything. Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded paper, worn but intact. I even had a few interviews after that. But when they ask for an address and you don't have one, he trailed off, his voice breaking. The judge nodded slowly, setting the paper down. Homelessness is not a crime, Mr. Cole, and poverty is not proof of unfitness. Ethan's lips trembled. Then why does it feel like one? A silence followed, heavy, honest, and heartbreaking. The judge leaned back, thinking deeply. Behind the bench, he wasn't just a man of the law. He was a father, too. He cleared his throat. Bailiff, call in the clerk. I want a transcript request on this man's case. Every hearing, every motion, and get child services on the line. I want to know where his daughter is now. The bailiff nodded and hurried off once again. Ethan looked down, unable to hold back his tears. Thank you, sir. No one ever cared enough to ask. The judge's expression softened. It's not charity, Mr. Cole, it's justice. Sometimes it takes someone standing in the wrong courtroom for the right thing to finally happen. The clerk arrived minutes later, a woman in her 40s with glasses perched low on her nose. She carried a laptop and began typing quickly as the judge dictated. Reopen family court case No. 10723 for review, under judicial discretion. Set an emergency hearing for custody reconsideration. The courtroom buzzed quietly with energy. For the first time, the system that had failed Ethan began to move, slowly but genuinely in his favor. Then came a moment of hesitation from Ethan. Your Honor. Can I ask one thing? Go ahead. Will she even remember me? The judge looked at him, eyes filled with the kind of empathy words couldn't disguise. Children remember love, Mr. Cole, even when the world tries to make them forget. A faint smile ghosted across Ethan's face. She used to sing this little song every night before bed. Said it kept away nightmares, maybe. Maybe she still does. The judge nodded quietly. Let's hope she does. Just then, the bailiff re-entered, looking tense. Sir, I got a hold of child services. The caseworker said Lily was transferred to another foster home 6 months ago, out of the city. But there's something else. He hesitated. Go on, said the judge. She said the girl's been asking about her father constantly. Ethan's head jerked up, tears filling his eyes instantly. She remembers me? The bailiff nodded. Yes, sir. They said she refuses to call anyone else Dad. The judge exhaled deeply. For a man who'd seen countless tragedies in his courtroom, few moments had struck him like this one. That settles it, he said firmly. We're not closing this file. He turned to the clerk. Contact the foster agency directly. Arrange for supervised visitation immediately. Mr. Cole deserves the chance to see his daughter. The clerk typed rapidly, nodding. Ethan's legs wobbled, and for a second it seemed he might collapse. He steadied himself on the table, whispering a silent prayer. Thank you, Your Honor. I don't know how to repay you. The judge looked down from the bench, his expression kind but serious. You don't repay justice, Mr. Cole. You honor it. Be ready to show her the man you still are, the father she never stopped believing in. Ethan nodded, his voice trembling with emotion. I'll be ready, sir. I promise. The judge smiled faintly. Good, because something tells me this story isn't over yet. He glanced down at the folder again, then at Ethan, this time not as a judge to a defendant, but as one father to another. Outside, through the tall courtroom windows, the afternoon light spilled across the floor, warm and golden. Ethan looked toward it, tears glimmering in his eyes like they were reflecting the first sunlight he'd seen in years. For the first time since losing everything, he had something back, hope. And as the judge called the next case, that fragile hope stood taller than any verdict ever could. But what Ethan didn't know yet, what none of them knew, was that his battle wasn't over. Someone from the system would soon arrive, determined to keep things exactly as they were. And once again the courtroom would become the stage for a fight not between guilt and innocence, but between law and love. The next morning, Judge Raymond Hale arrived early, long before the courtroom filled. He sat behind his bench, reading Ethan Cole's file once more. Every page, every note, every decision that had led to a father and daughter being torn apart. By the time the bailiff entered, the judge's coffee had gone cold. Your Honor, the bailiff said carefully, the representative from Child Services is here. Along with Mr. Cole, the judge nodded. Bring them in. Ethan walked into the room wearing the same tattered clothes, but something in his face had changed. The hollow sadness was still there, but now it shared space with hope. Fragile, trembling hope. Behind him came a woman in a gray suit, clipboard in hand and a look of cautious indifference on her face. State your name and position for the record, the judge said. Cynthia Drake, Senior Case Manager for Family Protective Services. Ms. Drake, the judge began, his tone measured. Mr. Cole's case has been under your department's care for 2 years. I've reviewed every report, every visit, every note, and I have questions. Drake nodded curtly. Of course, Your Honor, but I'd like to note that Mr. Cole's situation, while unfortunate, has followed all proper legal protocols. Legal, the judge repeated quietly, leaning back. Tell me, Ms. Drake, do you believe the law and justice are always the same thing? She hesitated. They're supposed to be. Supposed to be, the judge echoed, then leaned forward. Mr. Cole has completed every requirement your department listed. Employment readiness, sobriety, counseling, and rehabilitation. Yet your reports claim he's not ready to reunite with his child. Why? She flipped through her papers, eyes cold. Because he lacks permanent housing. And have you or your office provided him with any assistance toward securing that housing? Silence. Ethan shifted uncomfortably. I tried everything, sir. I even applied for the city's housing aid program. But they told me there was a waiting list of over a year. Judge Hale's voice grew firmer. And during that year, his daughter continues to grow up believing her father abandoned her. Ms. Drake, does that sound like a system that protects families? Or destroys them? Drake's expression faltered for the first time. We do the best we can with limited resources, Your Honor. The judge's gavel hit the bench softly, not as punishment, but to command silence. Limited resources are no excuse for limited compassion. Ethan looked up, tears returning to his eyes. I don't want to blame anyone, sir. I just want to see her. Even for a minute. I want her to know her dad never stopped fighting. Drake closed her folder, exhaling. Your Honor, the child is in a stable home. Disrupting that could cause emotional damage. Judge Hale stood slowly. Do you know what causes emotional damage, Ms. Drake? It's telling a little girl her father doesn't care, when he's been standing outside your office for months, begging for a chance. The room went still. Even the bailiff's hands froze on the rail. Then from the back of the courtroom a quiet voice echoed. Soft, uncertain, but unmistakably young. Daddy? Every head turned. There she was, Lily, a small girl with chestnut hair clutching a social worker's hand. Her wide eyes shimmered with tears as she looked toward the man she hadn't seen in nearly 2 years. Ethan's breath hitched, his knees nearly buckled. Lily? She broke free from the worker's grasp and ran down the aisle. Ethan fell to his knees as she threw her arms around him, sobbing into his chest. I missed you, Daddy. The courtroom fell utterly silent. The judge turned away for a moment, his jaw tightening as he swallowed the lump in his throat. Ms. Drake blinked rapidly, trying to compose herself. Your Honor, this wasn't. Let them be. The judge interrupted gently.
Minutes passed before Ethan finally looked up, still holding Lily close.
I told you I'd find you, he whispered into her hair. She nodded, crying harder. I kept waiting, Daddy. I told them you'd come. The judge took a deep breath, his voice breaking slightly as he spoke. Mr. Cole, you have shown this court what true perseverance looks like. And you, young lady, he said, looking at Lily, have reminded us all what faith really means. He turned to the clerk. Effective immediately. I'm ordering emergency supervised reunification between Ethan Cole and his daughter, Lily Cole. The Department of Child Services is to provide transitional housing within 72 hours and assist Mr. Cole in securing permanent residence within 90 days. The gavel struck once, firm, final, and filled with mercy. Ethan looked up at the judge through tears. Thank you, sir. I'll never forget this. I'll prove I can give her the life she deserves. The judge smiled softly. You already started doing that, Mr. Cole, the moment you walked into this courtroom and refused to give up. He stood and stepped down from the bench, walking over to where Ethan knelt with his daughter. It was unusual, almost unheard of, and for a judge to leave his seat, but this wasn't just a case. It was humanity. He placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder. The law can build walls, Mr. Cole, but today we chose to build a bridge instead. Ethan could only nod, overcome with emotion. As the bailiff escorted the social workers out and the court emptied, Judge Hale stood by the window, watching the father and daughter embrace. Outside, the rain had stopped. A thin ray of sunlight broke through the gray clouds, falling directly across them like a blessing. The judge smiled faintly. Sweet justice, he murmured, not as a verdict but as a truth. And for the first time in years, Ethan Cole walked out of a courtroom not as a broken man, but as a father reunited with the only verdict that ever mattered, love. 3 weeks later, the same courtroom that once echoed with silence and sorrow was alive with something different. Laughter. Ethan Cole, now dressed in a clean shirt and borrowed tie, stood beside his daughter Lily as they waited for the final review of their reunification order. The once shaking man who had stumbled in desperate and broken now stood tall. His beard was trimmed, his shoulders squared. Hope had a way of rebuilding a man faster than any miracle. Judge Hale entered the room, his robe flowing as he took his seat. His eyes softened when he saw the two of them together. Well, he said, clearing his throat, it seems we have progress. Ethan smiled nervously. Yes, Your Honor. We moved into the transitional apartment last week. It's small, but it's ours. I even started work at a repair shop again. That's good to hear, the judge replied. And Lily? How's school? Lily beamed, holding up a drawing from her backpack. I drew our new house, and Daddy says we'll plant flowers outside when it's warm. The judge chuckled softly. That sounds like a wonderful plan. Ethan reached for the drawing, his hand still calloused but steady. She's the reason I get up every morning, sir. You gave me that reason back. Judge Hale nodded slowly, a proud smile crossing his face. No, Mr. Cole, you gave it to yourself. The court only opened the door. You were the one who walked through it. There was a quiet moment then, the kind that fills a room with meaning more powerful than any law book. Judge Hale set aside the final paperwork and looked at them both. Ethan Cole, he said formally, it is the judgment of this court that full custody of Lily Cole be returned to her father, effective immediately. Ethan froze. For a second he didn't move, as if his heart needed time to believe what his ears had heard. Then slowly, tears welled up in his eyes. He turned to his daughter, who looked up at him in confusion. Does that mean we can go home, Daddy? He laughed through his tears. Yeah, sweetheart. It means we can go home. The courtroom erupted in quiet applause from a few staff members who had followed the case since that first day. Even the clerk, who usually stayed stone-faced, dabbed her eyes discreetly with a tissue. Judge Hale leaned forward slightly. Mr. Cole, I hope you understand something important. The world doesn't always give second chances, but when it does, we must make them count, not just for ourselves, but for the ones we love. Ethan nodded. I will, Your Honor, I swear it. Good, the judge said, rising from his chair. Then I believe we can adjourn. As the gavel fell one last time, the sound wasn't cold or final. It was warm, like the closing note of a song that had finally found its ending. Outside, the day was bright and calm. Lily skipped along the courthouse steps, holding her father's hand. The city still bustled, people still hurried, and life still carried its share of cruelty. But for the first time, Ethan didn't feel invisible. He looked down at his daughter, her laughter cutting through the noise of the street. You hungry? He asked. Always, she giggled. He smiled, pulling a few crumpled bills from his pocket. Then how about pancakes? You used to love those, Lily nodded eagerly. With syrup? Of course, he said. Always with syrup. As they walked away, the courthouse doors closed behind them. Not like a prison, but like a chapter completed. Inside, Judge Hale stood by the window, watching them fade into the crowd. His clerk approached quietly. That was beautiful, sir. He smiled faintly. Justice isn't always about punishment, he said. Sometimes it's about repair. And as the sun spilled across the polished courtroom floor, the echoes of that father's plea, Please, Your Honor, I just need you to listen, faded into something eternal. Not a cry for help, but a reminder that even in the coldest halls of justice, there's still room for mercy. That even broken hearts deserve to be heard. And that sometimes the sweetest justice isn't a verdict at all. It's a reunion.